Welcome, everybody, to Day 4 plenary session of our Ignite Innovation Showcase. I'm your Master of Ceremonies, Jim Oliver. I'm the Director of the Student Innovation Center. We have a great event planned for the evening, but just to remind you of today, it was Feed the World Day. We had a tremendous, again, the place was filled with all kinds of activities highlighting a variety of innovations at Iowa State. We had the Food Fusion Challenge. We had the Student Innovation Fund Challenge, the Feed the World Judging Session, Innovation Sprints, Food Insecurity Challenge, which is a high school and 4-H program. We're going to talk about all of these as we go forward. And the College of Human Science Start Something annual entrepreneurship showcase is still going on right as we speak. So the building is full of activity right now. But today, for the next couple hours, we have two really wonderful keynotes talks that are going to be inspirational, I'm sure. And we also we'll be announcing some of the awards at the end of this session for the Innovation Fund Challenge, as well as the Food Fusion Challenge. And so we got a full program. I'm excited to share it with you. And I would like to, come on in, you're fine. I would like to kick it off by introducing Dr. Dan Robeson, who is the Dean of our College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. And he is going to introduce our first speakers, but he's welcoming some guests right now. But so we have two Dans tonight. We have Dan Robeson and Dan Grooms over here, our Dean of the College of Vet Med, and he'll be part of the program as well. Various other dignitaries to the audience. Dan, come to the fore. You have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver. This is a pleasure to be here with you today. A lot of fun stuff going on. I just got to listen to 5 different presentations by students that are doing remarkable work. These are the thinkers and doers of tomorrow. And there are all kinds of folks in this room and throughout the building who inspire them. And I'm up here to briefly introduce you to somebody many of you already know who has been the source of much of this inspiration. And so let me ask Kevin Kimley to come stand up next to me while I say nice things about him. Kevin doesn't know this is about to happen. So it's a pleasure to be here today. In 2005, so years before I was here, the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences established the Agricultural Entrepreneurship Initiative, which is well known as AGGIE, to develop the next generation. Is that better? Yep. Okay. To develop the next generation of entrepreneurs, of thinkers and doers who turn great ideas into great products and activities. And 13 years ago, Kevin Kimley joined the faculty here to direct the Ag Entrepreneurship Initiative. He has done remarkable work, and in fact, this evening, we're going to honor him with a Pioneering Award, because in so many ways, Kevin has pioneered this complete area of investigation and development here at the university, and he has not only inspired countless students, I'll give you some numbers in a moment, but he has inspired the other colleges and the other entrepreneurs here on campus to do this kind of work that brought us here to today, when we have a new Student Innovation Center full of young entrepreneurs and older people advising young entrepreneurs. And so Kevin has been central to that. Kevin is a seasoned entrepreneur himself, starting an entrepreneurial and innovation curriculum here in the college, working in his own companies and in many, many different ways, and inspiring people to be thinkers and doers. At the top of the Agricultural Entrepreneurship Initiative website, Kevin has a quote from none other than George Washington Carver. And I think in many ways this speaks to who Kevin is. Since new developments are the product of a creative mind, we must therefore stimulate and encourage that type of mind in every way possible. So this is the quote that Kevin has chosen for his website, and I think it speaks to what Kevin does and who Kevin is. Sometimes I'm told that Kevin is referred to as the anti-job guy, the guy who advises students not to take a job, but instead to create something for themselves. A risky idea for sure, but one where there are equal benefits as well. If you go onto the Agricultural Entrepreneurship website, you will find, among other tabs, a wall of fame. And if you click on that, you will see some of the companies and some of the activities that have been inspired uniquely by Kevin's work, including that of Colin Hurd, one of our keynote speakers this evening. Kevin has built these entrepreneurship programs into an ecosystem of activity that goes all across the state of Iowa and well behind. More than 60,000 jobs have become available to people because of the entrepreneurs he's inspired. He works with more than 1,200 students each year. We have the Innovation Fellows Program, the Ag Startup Engine, travel courses, lectures, Changemaker Academy, and all these things are central to the College of Ag and Life Sciences. I dare say they are inspirations to the other colleges here on campus, and it is because of Kevin's very, very fine work. Kevin works with a team, a lot of people who are involved: Dave, Matt, Marna, Emma, Marcy, people whose names you might recognize. There's a Wendy in there, a Joe, a David, a Bruce, and a Roger. All these people have helped to make Kevin's work possible, to make the work of others possible. He is indeed an entrepreneur and a pioneer, and we recognize him today for that. The Agricultural Entrepreneurship Initiative, like the other programs on campus, now has a new name. It is Start Something in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Iowa State University. And in fact, if you Google up Agricultural Entrepreneurship Initiative, it'll take you to Start Something in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. And so Kevin and his team have fully embraced this idea. I'm going to present Kevin with a token of the university's appreciation for his work. But first, I want to also make a personal comment. One of the things that Kevin does so well is he smiles. And you see Kevin in the hallway, you see him work with students. Even if you're delivering him bad news about budget, he smiles. He makes you feel like you want to work with this person. He's a bit of a Pied Piper. Students come to him, the students want to work with him, they want to travel with him, and they're inspired by him. I asked David Acker earlier today. David's been in the college much, much longer than I, and spent 15 years as the Associate Dean for Academic Programs, was here when Kevin came on board and when he and then Dean Winterstein developed the idea for the Agricultural Entrepreneurship Initiative that then was supported by Bruce Rastetter. Kevin holds the Rastetter Chair in Agricultural Entrepreneurship, supported by Roger Underwood and others. I asked David what it is about Kevin. What would you say about Kevin if you were making this presentation tonight? And David said it's all about attitude, that Kevin projects an attitude of positivity, an attitude of we can do this, and of you can do this. And so with that, I have the pleasure to present Kevin, and I won't drop it, because it's made from glass here in the Gaffers Guild. This award, Kevin Kimley, Director of the Cal Start Something, and the recipient of the Pioneering College Entrepreneurship Ignite 2022 Award. Please help me congratulate Kevin. I'm only supposed to take 2 minutes. I probably took 4, but let's give Kevin a chance to say hello.
Thank you, Dan. I won't drop it. So does getting a Pioneer Award mean that I'm really old? No, thank you, Dan. None of this can happen in a company or in a university unless you have the right leadership in place. And so our former dean, Wendy Winterstein, was great to work with, and Dan has been absolutely terrific, and I completely mean it when this stuff couldn't happen without the leadership that we have at Iowa State University. So one of the cool things in my job is that I get these insane experiences where I meet a student that we've worked with in the past. Sometimes, I usually remember their face. I hope they help me remember their name, but the conversation goes something like, hey, Kevin, I'm such and such, and I'm doing it. And I say, great, what are you doing? And they go on to say what they're doing on their farm or with their business. And it's like, wow, that's so cool. And they say, so I'm using what I learned in your class. And I say, great, what'd you learn in the class? Because you really don't know. And they go on to explain what they learned in the class, and it's a little bit hard to predict. And so it's just cool to watch young people from Iowa State University go out into the world, make an impact, build businesses, build farms, impact their communities, impact their families, of course, and so on. But with a smaller handful of students, I get to keep really in touch with them, and Colin Hurd, who I'm going to introduce, is certainly, one of those folks. So I still remember in one of the first years that I taught entrepreneurship in agriculture, the course where students work on creating their own ideas for businesses and farms and so forth, that Colin gave an idea that I think he might describe for us a little bit later for a new product. And one of our panelists, Mike Upa, who then worked for the Papa John Center for Entrepreneurship, stood up at the end and said, Colin, are you going to keep working on this? And Colin said something to the effect of, "Do you think I should?" And he said, "Yeah." And so he did. He kept working on it. And so I have a case study today that I use in a case study-based course. It's the first case that we work on during the year, and it's Colin facing the decision of, do I take a job or do I start my business? And students love to dive into what that decision looks like. And yeah, maybe I'm the anti-job guy, just possibly. Anyway, Colin went on to found one company as he graduated from Iowa State University, sold that a few years later, went on to form another company called Smart Ag. That was the first investment for a fund that we put together called Ag Startup Engine. Sold that company a few years later. Now I have the pleasure of working alongside Colin as a part-timer at that fund. And so he's a colleague and a friend and a great Iowa State alum. Please help me welcome Colin Hurd. Mike is yours.
Congratulations. Well deserved. I think there's a clicker here. Well, I'm honored to be here tonight. Kevin kind of took a little bit more time, but he covered some material for me, so thank you for that. I didn't know a whole lot about the Ignite week and everything that was going on here, so I researched a little bit and saw, the theme for today was feeding the world. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of pick that theme up and, share a little bit about my experience and why I think entrepreneurs are required to feed the world. Before that, I wanted to ask a question, right? What is an entrepreneur? Sort of a catch-all phrase. Somebody who quits their job and or doesn't take a job, like in my case. The definition, if you can read this, is a person who organizes and operates a business taking on greater than normal financial risk in order to do so. I don't really like this definition, actually. For me, and Kevin always gives me a hard time about this, but in my situation, I was a student, and so I was already broke. So for me to go be an entrepreneur was no financial risk. It's one way to look at it, right? I didn't have any debt, so I was fortunate in that regard, but I figured the worst case scenario was that I would go back to broke if the thing failed, right? So maybe I'm delayed a little bit in earning an income and getting a job and doing everything that an adult does when they grow up, but I figured my financial risk was pretty limited, and so this definition didn't fit well. So I kind of tried to create a different definition, and this is more what I like to think of as an entrepreneur, right? Somebody who finds an opportunity, recognizes, there is a problem, and then understands that in solving that problem, there's a business in place. And so by creating a solution, they can build a company out of that. And risk is a part of it, for sure, but I wouldn't say it's the defining part of being an entrepreneur. So a little bit about my background. Kevin shared some. I'll go into a little bit more detail, but I was on Case IH's website today, and I saw this picture as it was scrolling through. If you look closely, you'll realize that that combine's actually running, the tractor's actually moving, and there's nobody in the cab. And so that was a really cool experience for me to see something that started here in Ames, actually in a parking lot on a remote control car, end up on effectively a 300 horsepower tractor and be a part of what is Case IH now. So I started though initially with an Iowa State degree. I was studying ag studies and business, and I was in Kevin Kimley's class. Initially, I thought I maybe wanted to go into law school. I don't remember the ag law program or the class that they have for undergrad, but I did pretty poorly in that, and then I took Kevin's class after that, and I started doing pretty well, and I was like, maybe there's a sign to this, and so I as Kevin mentioned, pitched this kind of idea and was encouraged a lot to pursue it. And I thought it was kind of silly because it was just something that I felt like I was forced to come up with this idea, right, as a part of the class. And it ended up, Mike, Upa, and Kevin encouraged me to pursue it, and so I did. Eventually, was able to develop a product to solve the problem. Again, going back to entrepreneurs are people who recognize an opportunity in a problem. And so the problem was compaction during planting. And so we created a tillage tool that was able to address that compaction by mounting on the back of a planter. I won't go too technical into what that is, but ultimately people had a need for it and they started wanting to buy it, and we started selling it and got it into the marketplace. And then I was able to license it to a larger manufacturer. What I realized in that process, though, was that compaction was actually a result of a bigger problem. And so my curiosity, I guess, started engaging, and I started asking a lot of questions like, why are we using such heavy equipment in the first place? We don't have to, but what's the underlying reason for it? And what I realized was that it was due to lack of labor on the farm. And so farms had to get as much done per operator hour as they could. And so that sort of led me down this rabbit hole, which eventually became Smart Ag. So Smart Ag's fundamental problem that we were trying to address was labor shortages and qualified labor shortages on the farm. So we built a system that could be installed onto a large row crop tractor to make it completely driverless so that a combine operator could have his grain cart come up, he could unload onto it, send it back to the edge of the field with no one in the cab. As far as I know, it's the first commercialized system for a autonomous tractor, so it's pretty cool. In 2019, Raven acquired Smart Ag, and then I joined the team at Raven. It was a good experience for me, and gave me the opportunity to sort of wear the other hat for a while, right? Realize what I said no to a long time ago when I graduated college. I had a real job, and I was primarily focused on solving chemical use, trying to reduce chemical while I was at Raven. It was a really good experience. I actually just quit my job at Raven 2 weeks ago, so I'm back out into the wild, and I'm excited for that. So that's a little bit about my background. I guess the theme that has been consistent through all of that is trying to understand problems, look at them as opportunities, and address them. So the other thing that I realized through that experience was the necessity of entrepreneurship. So being in a corporate environment and trying to innovate in a larger company is very, very difficult. Even if you're an innovative person like myself that's in that environment, it can be really challenging. So why is an entrepreneur needed to feed the world? I think there's a lot of good history lessons in here. So I realized that I didn't put any probably great Iowa State examples on this, but if you look through history, every major breakthrough innovation, I would say, every major company that has created a lot of change in ag and helped feed the world has always started from an entrepreneur. Norman Borlaug, most people probably don't think of him as an entrepreneur, probably think of him more as a scientist, but he worked at DuPont, and after the war, I guess they offered to double his salary to keep him there, and he quit his job, left, and went and headed up the research institute in Mexico that led to a lot of the breakthrough technology and innovation. So he's a great example. John Deere, you're probably all very familiar with his work and background, but great example as well. John Queeny, most people don't know much. Well, I guess I didn't know much about John Queeny, but he invested his whole life savings to effectively start what became Monsanto. Really interesting story there of a guy with a lot of grit, a true entrepreneur that just made it happen, right? And then I think another great example, more modern example, is Al Meyer, right? Sort of a living legend in my mind. Was an engineer, understood how GPS technology was going to impact and make a difference in ag, and created the yield monitor. There's so many technologies today that are tied to that breakthrough innovation. And it took an entrepreneur like Al to recognize the opportunity in that technology. So one of the things that I guess I've learned over the years, being sort of in a corporate environment and an entrepreneur, is that the speed of tech is much faster, and the technology that's being developed is much faster than what companies can keep up with. So I did a little bit of math here for you. This is a business person math, so anyone who's actually an engineer can critique this. But so the thesis here is that if you take technology plus a problem and you multiply it by an entrepreneur, you'll get a new market that's developed or a new product, right? It's a very efficient formula. Now, if you take technology and a problem plus a company, typically what happens is they create new features for an existing product in an existing market that they have. They just don't have the DNA within themselves typically to innovate in a breakthrough way. Now, it's not the case in every situation, but in general, it's really difficult. And I'll share one little experience. So for the last couple of years, I've been working to create this idea of an entrepreneurship mentality within CNH and Raven, right? What's really interesting is it's actually harder for them to develop that, embrace that, culturally make that a reality than it is for them to acquire outside companies. They have a process for that. So kind of the feedback I essentially got was, hey, don't worry, don't try to do this here. It's way too hard. Go create something and we'll just buy it later, right? I'm like, okay, I'll do that. I guess in kind of conclusion here, one of the things that I would like to point out is that today is a better day to be an entrepreneur than ever in history, in my opinion. And part of the reason for that is because of the enormous amount of acceleration, exponential acceleration in innovation and technology that we are in the middle of today. So if you look at this graph, I'm sure you won't all be able to see it from your seats, but you know, in the 1400s, we had the printing press, and then not much really happened until we got to man on the moon in the 1950s. But in terms of the growth, has skyrocketed since then, and it's only going up, right? So each one of these I would consider to be sort of breakthroughs or enabling type technologies that allow for new opportunity. So there's an enormous amount of platform technologies. AI is an example of that I think is going to have a huge impact on ag. Automation, autonomy, you know, CRISPR type technology. So there's a ton of new platforms that we can innovate on. And guess what? There's also some really massive problems to solve. I just highlighted this one because I do think we're going to experience some major challenges with food supply in the coming years. And so this is just one example. There's a lot of other ones, but there's some really big problems that do need entrepreneurs to help feed the world. And so I guess my encouragement would be understand the problems, understand the opportunities, multiply that times technology, and go do something awesome. That's it. Any questions? I do have to run right after this, so unfortunately I won't be able to join you, but if there's any questions,
Let's
take that
first.
Am I good on time?
You are perfect. If you can stick around, we've got maybe 5 minutes for some questions. Anyone would like to ask a question of Kevin? There we go. following this.
What is the most pressing challenge that you see of all the ones that we face?
Well, I don't have a massively broad understanding of all of ag. First of all, I've kind of focused a little bit in terms of the equipment, the autonomy side, the labor side. Labor is a really big one that, to me, is hugely important to address in coming years. It won't be addressed simply through, trying to put more people into the workforce, right? I think part of it is changing what being in the workforce means and how that feels. And so there's a ton of innovation that I think will occur. We've already started to see it. COVID helped catapult this into probably a higher priority than it ever has been. You see remote work, and you see people quitting their jobs, wanting to do part-time gig work. I mean, so there's tons of things that are changing there, and I think that's a huge challenge because Kevin can attest to this, and I can attest to it, but every single company out there is struggling to find labor right now. Not just manual type labor, but even qualified labor, higher educated people. So it's a big challenge.
When you were starting Smart Ag, how did you work to build a team that was able to solve such a diverse problem, and where did you know where to fill roles, and how did you go about reaching out to people?
That's a really great question, and it's probably the most critical component to our success was the team, right? Because I'm not an engineer, so I couldn't really do all of this. And I think part of it started with being able to clearly articulate what the vision was of the company and why that mattered, right? So myself and a lot of the people that ended up working at Smart Ag worked there not because of the potential financial return that we achieved, but because of the impact that we could have, right? So in all honesty, I feel really blessed that I was able to help them have that impact, right, through what is now a technology that they helped create is sort of a fundamental foundational element to Case IH's autonomous platform. So it's pretty cool. But I think that's part of it, right? Show the vision, show why that matters, and then give them an opportunity to contribute to it, You can cut me off whenever you want.
Well, we're doing all right. Maybe one more. Here you go.
So you said that following school, you said that you came up with this idea basically during your class and was told to pursue it. And from there, created an entrepreneurial mindset. So you said one of the keys was to keep finding problems to solve and being able to form solutions. How would you describe that process in a quantitative sense, being able to look for problems and finding solutions to them?
So I understand your question. You're asking kind of the process to go about that.
I guess what does it look like to continually?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I haven't probably perfected that. I think part of it is colliding your idea with reality. It's not my quote, but it's sort of a good way to think about it, right? So, and you can avoid a lot of risk in entrepreneurship by doing that. So think of the problem, think of how you want to solve it, and then before you go try to build an app or you go invest in technology, formulate that idea as clearly as you possibly can, and then take it to as many people as you possibly can, right? There's sometimes this, especially within the research side of the equation, there's this hypersensitivity to sharing ideas, right? Because, hey, somebody's going to steal it, Well, guess what? Companies can't find people to go do anything for them today, right? It's really hard. Most people who don't have a job and that could steal your idea probably already have a better idea that they're trying to pursue, so don't worry about it. Just go tell people about it. Understand like if there's a fit. And eventually what you'll do is you'll massage that to a point where it's something that's really actionable and hopefully leads you down a path of a lot of success. So.
Great answer. Thank you so much, Colin. Let's thank our speaker.
Thank you, Jim.
Next, I'd like to introduce my colleague. The Dean of the College of Design is Luis Rico Gutierrez, and he's going to introduce our next speaker. There's a mic there or there.
Perfect, thank you. So a couple of things about our next talk. The format is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be about talking heads. What we're going to have is, I'd love to have the talking heads here, but we're going to sit and have a conversation, and we hope that you will join us in that conversation at some point in the next 30 minutes. But before I get to that, I need to give you a little bit of background. So, and first of all, let me talk about this false dichotomy or trichotomy that says that design is either beautiful or affordable or functional. They're not supposed to be separate things. All of these things need to work together. So good design should connect with the spirits of people, should be beautiful. Good design should be comfortable, and all this pragmatic side of this. And good design should be for everybody, you know, regardless of budgets or backgrounds. So I think, you know, we think about design here in the College of Design as an activity that builds bridges between the poetic and the pragmatic in every issue in our lives. And actually, we can extrapolate from this. You know, we think about architecture, for example, as an activity that is defined by its products. You know, designing a bridge. But actually, the same process that goes into designing that particular bridge can go into building that bridge between the emotional component of one problem and the pragmatic side of the same problem. And I will argue that that's probably a huge opportunity for design in the near future. One perfect example is Oshoke Abalu. Oshoke Abalu, our guest tonight, is an architect and a futurist who pioneers innovative design solutions that infuse awareness and humanity in global workplace transformations. She received a Bachelor of Architecture degree from Iowa State in 2001 and worked for several prominent architecture firms before joining MetLife, Inc. in New York City in 2011. As Chief Architect and Global Head of Design and Construction for MetLife, she was credited by Time magazine with breaking down walls for rejuvenating and transforming MetLife's global work culture through the delivery of human-centered spaces. In 2017, Oshoke co-founded the Love and Magic Company, an award-winning solution studio that reimagines the future of work through inclusive ecosystems, innovations where people and technology work together for a better world. A Crain's 40 Under 40 honoree, Oshoke's work has been featured in Vogue, Smart Planet, Real Simple Magazine, Domino Magazine, Fast Company, Interior Design Magazine, ABC, NBC, TEDx, and more. So please join me in welcoming Oshoke Abalu. So I have a first question. I'm going to ask you this. How's it been to be back in Iowa, at Iowa State, in the College of Design?
Hi, everyone. How are you doing? It's really, you know, I graduated from Iowa State in 2001. And so being back here, I was just saying, like, such a mind F in a way, you know, because visually I'm experiencing the same places and the feeling of the places remain consistent, but they're completely different. And so I feel a lot of gratitude for the full circle nature of this, to have studied here and been a seed from here, and to now be back, you know, sharing the fruits of what I've learned. So thank you for the opportunity.
You've had a chance to interact with a few of our students today. Are they different, or is it the same cohort? If you think about your time here, how do you see them?
So this is my description of the energy of students, is pure potential. You know, I've spent a lot of the last 20 years in the corporate space, and sometimes you're so stuck on existing narratives. I talked about it, I've heard it before, where in the more professional space, we could be like the trees with the hard bark, and as students, we're the stems that are still growing out of the earth, and we're fluid and we're agile. And I felt such brilliance, you know, so I just want to give a round of applause to you and your teachers, if it's okay. Could we take a moment?
You know, it may be me, but it would be great to have an external perspective. I see students coming and going, you know, every year. There's something happening more recently. I see them as, there's a sense of urgency, you know, in solving big problems. I think many of them see that problems are coming to them, and they actually are accepting more and more, embracing more and more the responsibility of doing something about it. Do you have a similar perception when you go to workplaces and you have the new employees and the old employees in the corporate world?
Thank you for the question. While I was in class today, we spent a lot of time talking about the power of knowing yourself, right, along this journey. And in especially the last couple of years, what is the unique spice that we're contributing to any soup, you know, we play in? As Colin said, we are the creators of the future. And so if not us, we're truly leaving it for our children or our children's children. And so actually, I lost myself in that question. Could you ask me again?
The newer generations, you know, in school, and newer generations in the workplace, you know, this sense of urgency and commitment.
Yes,
to provide big solutions.
All right. So we're seeing the world, right, and it's happening, right, and it's happening to us. It's impacting us, and we're feeling our roles, in a sense, to participate, and maybe not even knowing how. And so I always suggest the first step as knowing yourself. Mm-hmm. And whatever we create in the world begins within, right? It begins from the stock of who you are. And so part of what I bring to the conversation is the language of the heart, right? So Colin talked about feeding the body, right? What about the heart? Where's the heart in all of this? Where's the feeding the soul? Mm-hmm. And so being in this space, what I find is that we all use different languages. This is the space you play in. Right, this space of pure potential and getting to know who you are as a student. So congratulations. It's been an honor to be in the vibration of education.
I'm just realizing one thing. The word future is a big component of all the things that we're talking about. Potential, there's this timeline. And I introduce you as a futurist. Why don't you tell us what a futurist is?
You're all futurists. You're all futurists. The best way I can describe it is to not let go of your vision, even when it doesn't make sense to anyone, right? So for me, I'm more attached to possibility. I'm more attached to my pure potential beyond my role. And so what that allows me to do is to create solutions, right? So I graduated with an architecture degree. I got my license. I worked in corporate America. I learned so much along the journey. But ultimately, even beyond an architect, I've also discovered I'm a writer, I'm a teacher, and it all goes back to the whole concept of knowing yourself.
So that sounds to me like entrepreneurship. It's a different take in entrepreneurship. So what is your own personal take on entrepreneurship, which is a big theme in this presentation? So,
you know, I think Colin's definition of entrepreneurship is right on point. And using my unique language of the heart, the way I see it is that each one of us is actually a masterpiece, right? Like a fingerprint. There will never be anyone like you ever again. And so we have this opportunity, like Khalil Gibran said, to imbue a breath of our spirit into anything we create. But in order to do that, we have to all realize we're master artists ourselves. And when you're a master artist, whether you call it an entrepreneur or you call it, even if it's a 9-to-5 job, we're all creating something, and the currency we're paying with is our life. And so then the question becomes, if I'm paying with my life, what problem am I solving? What unmet needs am I meeting, right? What am I contributing with this priceless currency? And pursuing that path grows us. Mm-hmm. In my experience, I am the benefiter of pursuing that, because then you get to, once more, know yourself. I was in class today with a gentleman, his name is Charlie, and Charlie talked about his upcoming work and his excitement to inspire joy into roller coaster design. Do you know what I mean? And I couldn't high five him enough from across the table. And even in that, he's an entrepreneur, because he's solving a problem, he's doing something different. So to answer the question, we may all be calling it different things, but we are creators, and we're creators of the future. And if not us, then our children's children. So what will you do with this currency? Does that make sense?
And at this point, I have a quote for, if you have questions or things you'd like to explore, please think about them, and please join us in the conversation. On my end, there's something about impact that is very related to entrepreneurship. Traditionally, we think about impact and entrepreneurship as an impact in a market, you know, and there's a return on investment that is financial. That is the traditional definition. But there's a way of thinking about impact. You know, you have an impact in society, and maybe sometimes the return on investment, the investment of your life, your time, what you're looking for is a return in the form of smiles, for example. And I think you as an entrepreneur, your impact is in inspiring people, inspiring big corporations in America to embrace these two sides of our lives. You know, not only the pragmatic and the practical, but also the emotional components that we take everywhere. you know, when we go. So, do you think you are changing the world? Have you changed it enough? What do you want to do in the future? What's still there in the future for Oshoke?
What a question. Rumi said, first I was clever. I'm going to rephrase it. First I was clever because I wanted to change the world. Then I was wise because I decided to change myself. So your question points back to the essence of my teaching, which is that there's a lot of outward focus, which is fine, but whatever we're creating in an outward space stems from who we be. And if you don't recognize, embrace, appreciate yourself, no one else will. And our best solutions come from the depths of you. You know?
Are there any particular, you're doing 1,000 things right now. In fact, I want to ask you first, can you tell me about, yeah?
So my work, right? Who can change the world? Like even the thought of that makes my knees weak, right? Like nobody can change the world, but I can continue to change myself. I can continue to grow myself. I can continue to explore the depths of my intelligence and my potential. But that requires a mental refocus, right? Within, not outward, within. Yeah, so to answer your question, I don't think about changing the world. Oh my God, that's so much. But what I do think about is what is the greatest performance I can give as a human being in this experience with all that my divine maker has given me, right? How can I show up in everything that I do? And along my journey, I found that when you do that, then you get everything, right? You get everything. So, but we seldom speak about this raw space, this critical space, and that's what I bring. But it's not about changing the world at all. That's too heavy for any one person. It's about changing yourself and continuing to grow as a human being, as a commitment.
So can you tell us a little bit about Love and Magic? Can you tell us, for example, where you've been the past 2 weeks and what projects are you working in?
Okay, no problem. So along my journey, I had the role of the chief architect at MetLife, and we were so focused on creating humane spaces, and so that's what we did. And of course, there was increased productivity, there was retention, like all the things any company would want was happening as a side effect of just seeing people, ensuring everyone had access to daylight, sit-stand desks. But after a while, you know, I think 400 projects in, we had impacted 60,000 people in the world, spent $1 billion in 6 years. I felt that, is this it? Right? Like, okay, so what happens if I leverage that instead of my role as an architect. And so I jumped and I created this company with my brilliant partner, and love stands for possibility, right? About you, I see you, I love you in my job, you know, just like Charlie said, I want to bring joy to you, you know, just like Rami said, I want to design for good. Like, I see you, I connect with you, and then design for the future. So that's where love and magic comes in. And where we found ourselves is in creating solutions. But I was joking today, so like the solutions are called like the heart of inclusion that I'm going to be releasing with LinkedIn soon, or the we way, or we, or, you know, they're all imbued in the opportunity for us to create loving solutions as a baseline. But in order to do that, we have to see and love ourselves.
I got dizzy thinking about your past 2 weeks. You told me you were 2 weeks ago in the middle of the Serengeti.
Yeah, and so I'm also all about the abnormal life, right? The life of a living artist. So my home is in Tanzania, and I was joking that 3 weeks ago I was in the Serengeti, but I also have a home in Brooklyn, and last week I was in Brooklyn, and now I'm here. But I love it so much because what it does is sometimes you can get so comfortable and think this is the world, right? You can't see beyond that, but by having these homes in these culturally alive zones, I get to shake myself up all the time with this.
Thank you for bringing a different perspective on what is to be a professional in the future, you know. At the end of the day, you went through the corporate experience, and you've used that to create a different way of working, a different way of, you know, contributing or finding yourself and then contributing to everybody. I want to open it for questions and comments from people in the audience.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, and I hear what you're saying. But most of us in this room are scientists. We're comfortable teaching science. So what advice do you have for us to teach your side of the story?
Oh, I love this question so much. So first of all, can we give a round of applause to our scientists in the house? So what I'm going to recommend is completely like off topic, but I believe as a scientist, you are an entrepreneur of solutions. You're a vessel of solutions. So I'm going to recommend breath work to you. I'm going to recommend that you breathe, and you allow yourselves to tap into all that you don't know, you don't even know you don't know. So thank you for being futurist and leading the way. That would be what I would advise. Yeah. Thank you.
Really inspiring remarks. Following on Jack's question about science, many of us think a lot about the word sustainability. Sometimes we wonder how best to measure it. Sometimes we criticize it because it can't be measured. I'm wondering how you would define and think about sustainability.
You know, language is so powerful, and you could start out something with one intention, and by the time it grows, that intention has taken on another story. when I think about sustainability, I think about life cycle sustainability, right? So beyond green technologies, I think about whole being wellness, right? I think about the innovative mind and how it is nurtured. I think about the ecosystem that is required to truly I've lost my words. I think about less of an individual and more of an ecosystem that's required to achieve the goals. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I'm going to make promote and invite you to come to the second floor in the building to see the work of our Option Studios, where we actually have students working exactly in the term that you're talking about, where, I think they're realizing that advancing ecological sustainability is impossible without advancing agendas in environmental justice. Where advancing agendas in eliminating hunger and feeding the world are impossible without thinking on issues of labor, of fair access, to work and all these different things. So we are, in a way, thank you for saying this, because I think we're trying to we have a common agenda there, the College of Design and you. So.
And it's so, sustainability is so important, whether it's about the soil, or it's about climate, or it's about education, technology. It's so important, but this is where I go back to the whole power of intention. Like, what problem are we solving? What is the unmet needs? Because we all need, we don't need, but like starlings in murmuration, there's more force when we're together versus an individual. And I call the symphony, where you're aligned around problem solving for sustainability versus the Band-Aid solutions. Like, I feel our children right now, the question we should be asking them is not, what are you gonna do when you grow up? But rather, what problem will you solve? Right? And in doing so, there's a language of sustainability built into what we think about work. So it's this ecosystem solution that's required, and it doesn't take like one person or one organization. It's an opportunity we all have to show up sustainably, whatever that means to you as an individual, as an organization, as a team,
The previous presenter, before I pass it to Deborah, showed this chart about the exponential growth of in technology and advances in all these different scientific and technological areas. In 1966, I think there was this architect also, British, his name was Cedric Price, who wrote the book that has, in my mind, one of the best titles ever, which is Technology is the Solution, but what was the question? And I think that is exactly the one thing that we need to bring back, that question to all of us. Deborah, go ahead.
Strangely enough, the question I was holding, or the comment I wanted to make, you guys just set me up, man. I mean, it's gonna seem like I'm responding to what you just said. We've talked a lot about problem solving. For someone who is a trained architect coming out of engineering, so maybe I don't think of myself as a scientist, but I do. I'm gonna say that the language of problem solving is from the 1970s, for God's sake, it's half a century old. And it's disturbing to me that at a moment of innovation and entrepreneurship, we keep using that language. And what I'd like to propose is that whether or not you are coming at your science or your craft or your philosophy or your theory, if you are always coming at it from the position of problem solving, you are always reactive. A problem was created and now you solve it. I believe that the great thinkers, the Borlaugs, I believe they are question posers. That pose the question before the problem emerges. And I think that is what innovation and entrepreneurship is. And I think scientists are just as good at posing questions as philosophers. And I think together, this is where it's important. I see you as a poet and a philosopher and an architect.
I'm going to ask you, Deborah, what do you think about, what do you feel about what unmet needs will you meet? What unmet needs will you meet? Okay.
Yes.
It's bigger. I get what you're saying. It makes sense. And I think we all have this opportunity to expand beyond the boxes we know. Yeah, the reaction. So I get it. And I'm down for that. What unmet needs. Yeah. Salut.
So help me thank Oshoke for being here. Thank you so much for being here. Right on the dot. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Well, that was wonderful. And we have my pleasure to introduce our next host. Dean Dan Grooms is the Dean of Iowa State's College of Veterinary Medicine and a good colleague and collaborator, and he is going to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver, and what a great afternoon here in the Student Innovation Center. I've had so much fun visiting with high school students and other colleagues today. It's just been a wonderful afternoon, and it continues this evening. So thanks for everybody for gathering with us today. It is indeed my pleasure to introduce our final keynote speaker tonight, Dr. Alison Van Eenennaam. Alison is a professor and extension specialist in the field of animal genomics and biotechnology in the Department of Animal Science at University of California at Davis. She received her Bachelor's of Agriculture Science from the University of Melbourne in Australia, and a Master's in Animal Science and a PhD in Genetics from the University of California at Davis. Her research and outreach program focus on the use of animal genomics and biotechnology in livestock production systems, and her current research projects include the development of genomic approaches to select for animals that are less susceptible to disease and the development of genomic editing approaches for livestock. And it's in this area where I had the chance of working with Alison in a previous life on a multidisciplinary team project that was approaching one of the most significant diseases in the cattle industry, bovine respiratory disease, and trying to find a genomic approach or approaches to solving that important problem. Alison has given over 500 invited presentations around the world and uses a variety of media to inform the public about science and technology. And she has also served on several national committees, including the USDA National Advisory Committee on Biotechnology and the 21st Century Agriculture. She's a passionate advocate of science and has frequently provided credentialed voices on controversial scientific topics. And for this work, she has received many awards, including the Council for Agriculture, Science and Technology's Borlaug Communication Award. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Alison Van Eenennaam.
I'll grab that from you. Hello and good evening, everyone, and thank you, Iowa State, for the invitation to speak to you this evening on my favorite topic, which is feeding the world. And I never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur until it was brought up, but then the definition that most kind of resonated with me was someone that took on a high degree of financial risk. And I'm thinking, yeah, those unfunded PhD students, I think maybe that does describe a PI, actually. And so I did relate to that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of genetics in feeding the world. And I realize I'm a geneticist, but I am a little partial to, what do we got going on here? To genetics being the solution to some of the world food problems. And I think we can all agree genetics is a very powerful force, and depending upon what our selection goals are, we may or may not make improvements. I'm not sure if a wolf would consider this to be an improvement, but certainly these dog breeders considered these to be improvements. And whilst it's all fun when we're talking about our pets, it actually becomes very serious as it relates to sustainability when we start talking about our food production. And I guess the beauty of genetics is that once you've inherited a trait, it's kind of a free lunch from then on, in that it is heritable and passed on with no further inputs required to get that characteristic. And I think what's interesting to look over time here is, this is yield of corn. Came to Iowa, what am I going to use as the example? I'm going to use corn. And what you see are these inflection points where there has been a new technology, a new innovation that's been brought to bear on trying to improve yield per acre or hectare, depending where you live. And you can see these inflection points. And to me, these are the innovations that we need in our breeding programs. And over time, you see, up until about 1925, it just kind of went along pretty straight. There wasn't any new innovations. But then, a new innovation comes and you see that inflection point. So we started doing double crossing, single crossing. And in the last 25 years or so, we've added genetic engineering in there. And of course, as an animal breeder, I have to put a similar example for dairy cattle in this case. And you can see there in the 1940s, that inflection point enabled by artificial intelligence? Yeah, not exactly, guys. Artificial insemination, which allowed the use of the best males more widely and therefore enabled increased yield per cow. And whilst this may be obtuse to most consumers drinking a glass of milk, I think the important aspect as it relates to sustainability is that as a result of this, a glass of milk today has about 1/3 of the carbon footprint that a glass of milk did in the 1940s. And that's almost invisible to most people. It's happened as a result of adoption of innovations, not only breeding innovations, a little bit of animal health innovations, okay, I'll give you that, animal feed innovations, but that has this really big knock-on effect in terms of sustainability. And that's where I really feel genetics has such an important role to play. And as we went up that big innovation curve that we saw, along came genome sequencing. And I was born in 1963, 10 years after DNA got discovered, quote unquote. And who would have envisioned that in my lifetime, when I was going through college, we barely even spoke about DNA, that we would sequence the human genome, and that was a feat in and of itself. And then, oh my gosh, we did the bovine genome, if only we were done, right? Now we do thousands of bovine genomes, and what we find is when we compare these genomes, we're fundamentally very similar to our livestock species because we all evolved from a common primordial sludge, if you will. And if you actually compare the genomic composition of cattle and humans, there's 83% identity. In other words, if you think about it, we're kind of a little bit transgenic cows. And so I want you to think about that the next time you have a look at our cow friends. And what we've been able to do with all this information is by looking at the variation that exists between the genomes of different animals, we've been able to put together these things called SNP chips, where we've basically got 50,000 markers that are spread throughout the 3 billion base pairs that make up the bovine genome that can be assayed in a single little rectangle on these slides and spit back a genotype of an animal. That is, what D's, C's and T's and G's and A's it has at 50,000 different locations in the genome. So what? That alone is nothing. But where the power is when you actually use it to predict the genetic merit of an animal. So this is how genetics works. I know you may not all be genetics majors, but this is pretty much how it is. And you'll know if you have children with the same partner that at the beginning of conception, they all have the same estimated breeding value or genetic merit. We don't know anything else other than we know who mum and dad are. And if we know if mum and dad are good from a genetic merit perspective in dairy cattle, that probably the progeny will be good. But then you get a group of flushmates, or in human terms, siblings, full siblings, they don't all come out the same, do they? That first one comes out and you're like the best parents on earth and it's just, you know, got all the brains. And then that next one comes out and you're like, did I bring the correct child home from the hospital? Because they're so different. And the reason they're so different is because they inherited an entirely different set of alleles from mum and dad. Same parents, different alleles. And basically using genomics, that chip I mentioned, you can have a look at what they got in this kind of black box of Mendelian sampling. How lucky did they get in the genetic roulette that happens every time we sexually procreate and create a new animal? And using genomics, we can say, aha, of all these ones, this guy got the luckiest, and he is going to be the best. I can tell because I saw what he got from mum and dad, and I'm going to make him be the sire of the next generation. Again, so what? Well, if we look at the rate of genetic improvement in the dairy industry, on the x-axis here is time, and on the y-axis is what's called net merit, which is basically the evaluation of the genetic merit of dairy bulls, which includes a component that has to do with disease resistance, and I will note, now includes a little tiny amount for bovine respiratory disease resistance. But what we see is once we start genomic selection, where we're actually able to identify the best animals at a younger age, we can basically double the rate of genetic gain. Another inflection point enabled by this amazing DNA data that we've got from genomics. Pretty much adopted in the global industry from a dairy perspective, very little pushback. In fact, I'd say most people probably haven't even heard of it. And now we come to current technologies and genome editing, and something that I'm very passionate about because I think it has the possibility of bringing useful genetic variation into our plant and animal breeding programs in a way that's not accessible using conventional genetic selection. And I do a lot of outreach around genetic information, and so I put together, as I do, a little video that tries to explain what genomic gene editing is.
For centuries, animal breeders have selected individuals displaying desirable qualities and bred them to produce particular goals. Breeders are actually selecting unnaturally occurring DNA sequence variations that result in differences between individuals, like the color of a cow's coat. Using conventional breeding programs, achieving desired changes can take decades, especially in large livestock species like cattle, which have long generation intervals. Innovations in biotechnology are poised to help breeders improve the rate of genetic gain. University of California, Davis, animal geneticist Dr. Alison Van Eenennaam and members of her laboratory are exploring genome editing tools that could allow breeders to precisely introduce useful genetic variations into livestock breeding programs. Genomes are made up of DNA, containing the collection of genes, unique instructions detailing every characteristic of an individual, what they look like, the amount of milk produced, or resistance to disease. Genome editing offers an opportunity to edit these instructions precisely. One method to edit genomes is the CRISPR-Cas9 system. This system has two components, the Cas9 protein, which cuts DNA, and a guide molecule that directs Cas9 where to cut. Bound together, they form a complex that introduces a precise cut in the DNA. The break is then mended by the cell's natural DNA repair machinery. This can be used to inactivate undesired genes, like those that cause disease. Alternatively, the repair machinery can introduce useful DNA sequences which result in desirable traits, like heat tolerance. Genome editing complements traditional breeding methods. It has the potential to introduce useful traits like disease resistance and adaptability into genetic improvement programs, addressing some of the problems facing global agriculture.
So I'm pretty excited about this technology because I think it has some unique features. But I'm also worried. And I'm worried because of my 20-year experience with genetic engineering. Not that we've used genetic engineering in animal agriculture, but because of the misinformation around genetic engineering, which I fear is going to spill over into genome editing. And I give you an example here of the non-GMO project, which is a little butterfly that you'll see on all sorts of things in the grocery store, including water, basically guaranteeing that there's no GMO in that product. And here they've said right out of the gate, they are going to consider genome-edited food to be genetically engineered. They're basically defining genome editing as being GMO, and therefore they're going to basically market against that technology and label products that don't contain it, which is going to be a little bit more problematic in this case because quite often we're not introducing novel DNA. It's going to be hard to test for it. And why does that worry me? And I've spoken at Iowa State before about this, but this misinformation campaign around genetic engineering has been going on now for 20 years. And agricultural scientists have effectively been unable to change the narrative. And you know, my good friend Abraham Lincoln, just, you know, I have to just really emphasize his point here that don't believe everything you read on the internet just because there's a picture with a quote next to it. But that's exactly what we've seen happening during COVID. And it's been a little bit, I guess, schadenfreude watching the medical community dealing with the frustration of misinformation around vaccines. And I kind of feel like agricultural scientists are like, hold my beer, because we've been saying that this is what's happening, and it's been really interesting to watch different approaches which have had equally poor outcomes in terms of actually getting science to the masses, if you will. And it's been for 20 years now working in this field, when we have every single major scientific society in the entire world that says there are no unique risks associated with this technology. But then if we do a poll of the general public, it is actually the controversial scientific topic that has the greatest disconnect between the general public, shown in red here, and scientists at the AAAS meeting. And basically there's a 51 percentage point gap. How the heck did that happen? It didn't just happen spontaneously, and I think it's interesting to look back at where is this coming from. There was actually some research out of Iowa State here where it was found that disinformation around GMOs was partly being put out there by state players. For example, Russia, they found that RT and Sputnik were responsible for over 50% of the clickbait GM stories that had negative, incorrect information that people would click on. And then I'll talk a little bit about this particular guy because I was asked to go on his show and talk about GMOs. And just recently, as in last week, a movie came out called Science Friction, which I highly recommend you watch. It's about an hour and a half, and it talks about the friction between scientists being asked to go on popular media and popular media being an entertainment venue. And I'm going to play you a little clip from this. I'm going to point out on the stage here, this is Dr. Pam Ronald. She's a plant pathologist at UC Davis. This is a gentleman from the Center for Food Safety. It's an activist group. And this is Jeffrey Smith, who's actually from Iowa. And I'm going to play you a little clip. I will say there is a word in here. I think earlier we heard Oshoke say mind F. Well, I'm going to say arse. So sorry if that's bad, but that's Australian for you. So I'm going to play you this little clip because this is information that at the time that this was shot, this was the most popular daytime show on television.
I work with doctors all over the world. I published a book called Genetic Roulette, the documented health risks of genetically engineered foods. We found 65. We found GMOs were linked to thousands of sick, sterile, and dead livestock, thousands of toxic and allergic reactions in humans, and damage to virtually every organ and every system studied.
Jeffrey Smith appears very honest, and he's a very good salesman, but he has no scientific expertise, and he's got some very bizarre beliefs. He believes in yogic flying, which is something like bouncing along on your ass and considering that you might take off from gravity or something along those lines. I mean, these are not alternative scientific opinions, they're alternative in a very, very dramatic way from where the evidence is.
The points that are raised by Jeffrey Smith have been widely refuted. I urge the audience to go to academicsreview.org, biofortified.org, ucbiotech.org. These are all university-based information sources.
So here's the problem. You know, I see this frequently in lots of different areas. The population that believes that GMO foods are safe will believe they're safe. The population that believes they're not safe is not going to believe they're safe. And it doesn't matter if you go read a website. So convince me, I'm just sitting here, I'm asking, everyone watching this program sitting at home asking that question. They're saying either you're full of it or Jeffrey's full of it.
So we were a little nervous to go on Dr. Oz because she had had such a bad experience in terms of allowing the facts to come out. In fact, so why does this guy, who's just asking questions, feature this guy on his show? He's not just asking questions, is he? And I think, you know, Pam does what scientists do, the old information deficit, and it doesn't work. But we have a really hard time figuring out what does work. And it's not only popular media, there's also some scientists that try to create the appearance of there being no scientific consensus on GMO safety. And so despite every scientific society in the world, that doesn't mean unanimous, every single person on Earth or every single scientist on Earth. And this gets kind of trumped up to create this, well, maybe it's 50-50. You know, who knows? It could be. And this kind of, you know, false balance, false equivalence is really analogous to the kind of the climate change debate. And I think that it has created doubt in people's mind when in fact the data is really, really solid on this. And I want to go historically to a real warning when we start talking about misinformation as it relates to agricultural production systems and particularly genetics, because misinformation around food production has very bad consequences. It kills many more millions of people than even COVID has. And I'm going to take you back, and I thank the previous speakers for bringing up Norman Borlaug, but in his very first Agricultural Science and the Public paper, #1, he was alluding to the fact that at the time this was written in 1973, there was a crisis in international food grain market, in part due to a bad winter that killed winter wheat following a severe drought in the USSR. This is getting a little familiar. But there's also another more subtle but deep-rooted scientific cause behind the scenes that undoubtedly contributed indirectly, but nonetheless, to this failure. And that's the 30-year period from 35 to 65 of the pseudogenetics and lysenkoism and its disruptive effect on other aspects of agricultural and biological sciences. And for those of you that don't know your genetics history, Lysenko was a individual who didn't believe in Mendelian inheritance, and he believed that that was the ravings of a monk, i.e. Mendel, and he turned against Darwinian evolution to invoke a theory of cooperation more in line with socialist thinking. And he believed that plants and seeds could be trained to follow socialist organizational principles. And this theory, which would eventually be dubbed Lysenkoism, stated that crops could be trained to conform and produce better yields, almost from out of thin air, according to what he called the law of life of species. Seeds wouldn't compete with each other, but rather they would cooperate with each other in a near sentient fashion, like humans. This sounds a little goofy, but his choice to expose seeds to different temperatures, pack them tightly together in the fields, and forbid the use of pesticides and fertilizers resulted in massive crop failures. And just to really bring it home to the current time, this resulted in tragic famine in Ukraine that was called the Holodomor. And I'm not sure if you've seen this little girl in some of the footage that's been shown around the war in Ukraine, but she's a very skinny little girl and she's clutching wheat. And especially risky were his treatments like scraping seeds with sandpaper and treating them with acid, which weakened them to blights and fungal infections, making plants that did sprout insufficient for food and potentially dangerous to eat. Stalin's policies in conjunction with Lysenko resulted in the Holodomor, which killed somewhere around about 10 million people. And according to William de Young Lambert, a professor of history at Bronx College, the famine in the Ukrainian breadbasket was so severe that the sight of victims dropping dead on the street from hunger ceased to provoke notice. Likewise, the Great Leap Forward, which occurred in China, which was a 5-year plan to modernize China's rural and agricultural sectors through collectivism and industrialization, also resulted in decreased crop yields that killed millions. And I'm pretty nervous right at the moment, to be honest, watching the lack of a wheat crop going in Ukraine, that we are headed in a similar direction. And in this first CAST paper, Norman Borlaug alluded to the fact that he was concerned that there was a viewpoint that there were several extreme environmentalists that were basically leading the world into an environmental utopia, which advocate for policy changes and legislation that may be detrimental to agriculture, our food production potential, and to society in general. And too often, they use only data that support their theories about ecological doom, whilst ignoring much other experimental data that does not support their views. They often denounce all who agree with them, and I'm fearful about the long-term effect of such a pseudo-scientific approach on agriculture. And I actually think, someone asked what's the biggest challenge we face? I actually think misinformation is the biggest challenge we face at the moment. And I know it's romantic to think back to the good old days, but I just always like to look at this little back of the envelope calculation here. Looking in this case at 2007 production of soy and corn and dairy cattle, milk and broiler meat, and looking at how many acres, this is in the US, was required to grow those crops and how many animals were required to produce that milk and that broiler meat. And then if we'd gone back and hadn't adopted the innovations that we can use in 2017, we went back to the 1950s technology, the next column has how many acres we would then need. And then this pink column is what I call the hidden opportunity cost, or benefit, if you will, of the adoption of innovation in agriculture. And that is that basically, if we had used the older style genetics and production systems, we would need, for the soybeans in the United States, approximately the entire land mass of the state of California planted under soybeans in order to get the same yield in 2017 if we were using 1950s production methods. And that may be a good use for the state of California in some people's opinion, but I would like to keep Davis out of that. And it actually gets even crazier in corn because it would be the landmass of the biggest state, Texas, and then in addition to California, we'd need around 30 million additional dairy cattle head, which would have a huge environmental impact. And we need about 4.4 billion additional head of broilers and 66.5 billion pounds of feed due to the less feed-efficient chickens that existed back in the 1950s. These are real but unseen by most people, and I think it's a really important lesson to take home. And I just will finish with a real-world example that has actually happened in the last couple of years, and that is during COVID there was a lot of disruption to travel, and in May of 2021, the Sri Lankan president just arbitrarily banned all agrochemical imports, including herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers, in a bid to make the country's farming 100% organic, against the advice of the agricultural scientists of that nation. And that has had incredibly detrimental effects on food production in Sri Lanka, and also in their exports of tea, which is one of their main incomes, and has actually resulted in the country going bankrupt. And I think what's really frustrating is that there was an influential section of Sri Lankan agricultural economists and scientists who warned that this is exactly what was going to happen. But the president was listening to ideologues who suggested that that wasn't going to be the case, that they could go quickly without any additional training and be able to have a food production in the absence of these inputs. And I put that out there as a cautionary tale because sometimes I think we hear suggestions that we need to fundamentally alter our food production systems, and whilst we can certainly all have a discussion around that, we need to be well aware of the trade-offs that are associated with different suggestions, because there really is science behind food production, and you can't just wish away inputs that are required for example, crops to grow. And I think that for me, what worries me is that innovations that are required to actually feed the world in the future is going to be mandatory in order for agricultural production to keep pace not only with population growth, but also with a changing climate. And if we have misinformation around the adoption of novel technologies in agriculture that ultimately thwarts our ability to adopt these technologies, that to me is a real danger to our future food supplies. And I think that especially those of us working in agriculture have a real responsibility to try to work with the public and help to contextualize the trade-offs and do it in a way that's engaging and compelling, and to basically ensure that the future agricultural productions have access to innovations. So thank you very much for inviting me, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much. We have time for, we have some questions firing up at the last row.
So I actually had two questions. One's in relation to corn and one's in relation to cattle. As far as corn goes, there's plenty of variations made every year. How do scientists ensure that nutritional value keeps up along with things like yield and disease resistance? Second, in relation to cattle, do you think that as people become more sustainable, we'll see more of a preference towards cultured meat, or is that a long ways off?
I'll take the cattle question, and then I'll try to address the corn question, but I'm certainly not a corn breeder. You know, I think the cultured meat, to be honest, I think is a long way off, because I think it's going to be quite difficult to reduce that to practice. There's a lot of steps that have to fall in place there. And I do think it's important to look at, well, where are the cattle? And so we often look at cattle in the US. We've got about 90 million or so. Actually, there's a big chunk of cattle, about, I think it's something like almost half are on the continent of Africa. There's very big populations in Brazil. And are those populations that are going to replace cattle with cultured meat? I would argue not. Cattle serve much more of a role than hamburgers. They're also draft animals. They produce fertilizer. They have a range of different roles. So to me, cultured meat will probably be a kind of a niche market for certain consumers in the affluent first world, would be my guess on that. Corn breeding, I know there's lots of different varieties of corn, and that are based on their different temperatures and what have you. And I'm almost sure that corn breeders, like animal breeders, have a selection index that they use to make their selection decisions, to try to balance, to ensure that they're not only getting crops that are disease resistant and drought tolerant and grow hardy, but also are nutritionally what you would want. So I don't know if there's any corn breeders in the audience. There's probably someone that knows way more about it than I do. And I'm really hesitant to talk about corn breeding in Iowa, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's not me. One more question.
So I have one question. I have to tell you a couple of things. I was born and raised in Mexico, and it has been really interesting to come to Iowa because burlog, for me, has a different association that many people that I actually work with here in the States. You know, when I was growing up, the idea of burlog and something that he called chamaco, there was a different kind of corn that allowed not only to have better yields, but it actually allowed for a livelihood for big sectors of the population in Mexico, was for me is something that is always in my mind. So I wholeheartedly, because I lived through that and I've seen the benefits of this, I agree with you 100% on that side. Now, also as an architect in Mexico, I was trained as an architect. In Mexico City being a place where there's a lot of earthquakes, I'm very aware of all the technological advances to make high rises more safe, but I'm not sure if I could assure everybody that if there is an 8.6 Richter scale earthquake in Mexico City, that none of those buildings with the more advanced technology, I don't know if I will assure everybody that they will not fall. So, and I think that's where in the communication for me, and this is for my particular benefit, my conversation with my tribe, and my tribe, many of them actually, will not agree with GMOs. That's where I don't have tools to speak with them. So when you're telling me that there's absolutely no risk with GMOs, and if there are risks, what are those? And I would like just to know, because that will help me a great deal in having those conversations.
So you wanted a quick answer to that one. Nothing has no risk, right? It depends what it's used for. I can tell you that the products that have come to market have not been associated with any unique risks. So that's the 45 diseases that Jeffrey Smith alluded to. Bullshit. Absolute crap. Okay? Now, you want a more nuanced conversation about maybe herbicide-tolerant weeds or, whether that's been exacerbated by the use of a single herbicide-tolerant. We can have that discussion. But I guess the zombie that I would like to just put my stake in the heart of is that there are unique health risks that have been documented with the current food supply such that you need to go get that butterfly to protect your family. That is marketing hype. And it is basically the most cynical type of marketing because it's scaring parents into thinking, I don't want my kid to get whatever, autism, whatever they're meant to get, I'm going to get this more expensive thing, or more concerningly, I'll just avoid fruits and vegetables because I'm really nervous about herbicides and I don't know about those GMOs. I'll just go get some Chex crackers instead. I think that marketing to me is working against everything we do for the sustainability of agriculture and against people as well.
I think we all do. And Professor Van Eenennaam, fantastic talk and entertaining and informative. Let's give her a big hand. So next I'd like to invite Dean Dan Grooms back to the center stage to introduce our winners of the Food Insecurity Challenge, which is an interesting term, but you're already, as I understand, if you are, and yep, okay, yes.
Thank you. My name's John Lawrence. I serve as Vice President for Extension and Outreach here at Iowa State University.
And again, my name's Dan Grooms. I'm the Dean of the College of Veterinary Medicine here at Iowa State.
So today we had the opportunity to judge a competition, much as we've done all week here with college students, but these were with high school students. Our staff at Extension and Outreach and works with 4-H put forth a challenge about addressing a food insecurity challenge or a problem that they saw in their community or in their school. And it was just really exciting having these young people, these are high schoolers, that identified the problem and came forth with solutions.
At the College of Veterinary Medicine, or today, the College of Veterinary Medicine is granting awards of $1,000 to each of 3 teams. We actually judged 6 teams today, and so 3 of those teams will be receiving a $1,000 award to take back to their community, to their school, and to think about or work on actually applying the solution that they brought forward to us today and developing that in a further way.
And they've been here with us this evening, listening to entrepreneurs and such, so hopefully it'll spur them to continue on in this way. So we have 3 teams, and they're in no particular order, that are receiving these prizes. And so would they come down front when they call their names? So Dan, you want to introduce them?
So before I do that, I think we have most of the teams here today. Maybe one of them had to leave, but I'd like all the teams that competed in this challenge today just to stand up, and then I'd love everybody to just give them a round of applause. All teams. Carter, stand up. Everybody stand up. Carter, there you go. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so again, in no particular order, we're going to ask them to come forward, and then we're going to go ahead and give them a certificate, and then at some point, they will be getting some money from Iowa State and the College of Veterinary Medicine, again, to continue their great work. So again, in no particular order, the first team that I'd like to recognize, their project was the Backpack Program. And this team is from Sadell High School. And actually, this is not a team. This is an individual. And her name is Joanna Sanchez. So Joanna, you want to come down? There's a camera right there.
Smile to the camera here. Great, congratulations.
The next project is the student use microwaves. Again, this team is from Sadell High School, and the team members are Jaden Hutman, Preston Booth, Brian Gonzalez. They're actually here tonight. And then two of their team members unfortunately had to work tonight, and that's Breland Rustin and Trevor Llewellyn. So, team, come on down. There comes Brian. All right, and then the third team, their project was community gardens, and this team is actually a combination of schools, Boone High School, sorry, and Ames High School, and the team members are Brenna Maines, Logan Shearer, and Beth Anderson. Are they here? Yes, they are. I see them. Come on forward. Let's give all those teams one more big round of applause. So.
And John, really great program, and we expect all you students to come to Iowa State now that you've been. Next, this is a lot of fun. Our Food Fusion Challenge. If you haven't been roaming around the Student Innovation Center, we have a magnificent Culinary Creations Lab on the 3rd floor, and Yolanda Sanders and her crew were brave enough to turn loose a group of students to create amazing things up there, so I can't wait to hear the results. So Yolanda Sanders and Associate Dean Carmen Bain of the College of Ag and Life Science, so come on down. Yolanda leads the department, I gotta get this right, of apparel, events, and hospitality management, and it's known as the Awesome Department here at ISU.
Good evening. Oh, I really feel like you can do better than that. Oh, thank you. Good evening. Okay, wonderful. What an exciting week this is. Thank you, Jim, for the introduction. This afternoon, we had the opportunity to judge the first annual Food Fusion Project in the Culinary Creation Lab, which is managed by the Department of Apparel, Events, and Hospitality Management for the College of Human Sciences. The students were challenged to first create a video with a concept for a couple food dishes, and those were submitted and judged, and then students were selected to move to the next round where they were judged today. Part of their training involved food safety workshops, and then also workshops on food fusion, culinary arts, and also plating and presenting their creations. So we had 10 teams participate, and our judging was based on the presentation of the food to us, the three of us, and then also the taste. They had 5 minutes to present their concept to us. I also want to thank some members that were very crucial in putting this project together. So Kimberly Hope and Brooke Rogers with the Student Innovation Center spent tireless hours working on this. Dr. Lena Jong, who is an associate professor in apparel events and hospitality management, led the food safety workshops and then also worked with our graduate students and student employees within the lab. So we had Jiayoung Zhang, who is a doctoral student in hospitality management, and Jan Quickenstead, who's also a doctoral student in hospitality management. We have 3 student employees in the Culinary Creation Lab that helped with this project and also manage open lab hours for our students taking classes. They are Alex Uppenmeyer, Christine Su, and Sydney Ritzler. So thank you to all of you for making this project happen, because there was a lot of ingredients, a lot of tools, and small wares that had to be procured over the last month. Okay, so we have 4 categories of prizes, and we'll start with the 4th place individual. So we have 5 teams that received 4th place, and they will receive $500 award for their team. So we will start with Savannah's Bananas. Woo! So please, come on down. Yes. Will you, well, congratulations. Our next 4th place team is Kofta Askew. Thank you, congratulations. Our next team is Tricolor Cooks.
Linda, what was that creation? Oh. Yeah, I know, I get what bananas are, but.
Here, I will let the students.
What? So we made like a pudding type of dessert, and we added French crepe to it. And for our main dish, we made fried balls of cheese, kind of. Yeah.
Judging was really difficult.
It was very hard. Congratulations. So our next team is Delicious Doves. Would you like to give a quick demonstration?
Oh, we cooked meat beef stroganoff with buckwheat, onions, and mushrooms. And for dessert, we presented Ukrainian-style pancakes with poppy seeds and cream cheese like mascarpone ricotta mixed with berries.
I would also like to ask a representative from COFTA, SQ, and Savannah Bananas to come down also, just to give a quick description of your... Here you go.
Let's see. So we had these amazing cheeseburger dumplings for our first main course. Then on the side we had some mousse with nice fried cinnamon bananas. And then to top it all off, we had a strawberry shake, which was strawberry great.
Ask, we presented a lamb kofta burger alongside a tabbouleh salad and some potato chips to kind of fuse together the Mediterranean and American traditions of some comfort barbecue type backyard foods.
Okay, our last fourth place team is the Three Chefeteers.
We made a Haldi lamb risotto. Yeah.
Did you make dessert?
Oh, and we also made an arugula salad, but that was on the side. That wasn't as good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oops. Yeah, we should take that off you.
Okay, so next are our two third place winning teams. They will receive $1,000 for each team. So first we have Edible Engineers.
For our main dish, we had a type of sandwich with arepa dough, it's a Colombian type of dough, and then it was stuffed with a Chilean type of sauce called pepra, and it also had Middle Easternly seasoned chicken in there. And then for dessert, it was a babka with a sauce called egg liqueur. It was an egg-based sauce, and the babka was chocolatey. Yeah. Thank you.
Congratulations. Our next third place team is Cinerist Sisters.
We made a soy chorizo pupusa with a slaw and also mint chutney, and then on the side we made a mango lassi.
Congratulations. You got to shake my hand. Oh. There's too many things to know.
Okay, so now we're up to the second place awardees. We have two teams, and they will both receive $1,500 as a team, as an award. So, first we have Food for the Soul.
Okay, so we made a Korean beef taco, and then we made chorizo, shrimp, and grits.
Our next second place team is Chop It Like It's Hot. Congratulations. Who wants to talk?
So we made a Polish pierogi with Mexican chorizo, and we did roasted vegetables on the side with a ratatouille inspired French vegetable sauce, and we also did a pina colada egg roll on the side for our dessert, which was a Filipino Puerto Rican kind of fusion. Yeah.
Okay, our first place prize winner will receive an award of $2,500. And that team is New Desi Fusion. Congratulations. Congratulations. Who would like to speak? I'll speak.
Okay. So for our main dish, we created a tandoori pinwheel Wellington, which is a fusion of 3 dishes. It's a roulade, a Wellington, and tandoori chicken. So it's like a European and Indian fusion. And then for our side dish, we created soup ambrosia, which we fused together 2 cuisines. We fused borscht, which is like a European soup, and rasam, which is a Indian soup. They're both like a sour, tangy soup. So yeah.
So again, thank you to our participants and all of our judges, and let's give them another round of applause.
Thank you, Linda, and Carmen and Ruth. I forgot to introduce Ruth McDonald, professor and associate as well. Now that you're all starving hungry, we do have one more award about the Feed the World Challenge, and I'm going to Underwood. Mine's cut out now too. Jeff is Vice President at Kent Corporation, Vice President of Innovation at Kent Corporation. He's one of our innovators in residence, a mentor and a supporter of the Innovation Fellows program here at Iowa State. So I'm thrilled to have Jeff here to announce the winners. I'll hand them out. You got to call them though, okay? Yeah, let me get you a mic right there. Maybe say a few words about it.
Very good. Again, thank you for the introduction, Jim. I'm Jeff Underwood, Vice President of Innovation at Kent Corporation, and Kent has just really been pleased to sponsor Feed the World Day today. Thanks to everybody who's participated in today's conversations, pitches, and presentations. I really feel like today's events will, the result of today's events will be better food and feed to meet the needs of a growing world population in a more sustainable way. So it's my pleasure to announce the winners of the Feed the World Challenge. And Kent has partnered with the College of Ag and Life Sciences to provide the prize money for these well-deserved awards. And I'd just like to thank all the participants. So we have a tie for second place, 2 teams with excellent presentations and product concepts. So I'd like to call forward Boar Infertility. And that's a $5,000 award to get their product concept off the ground. Also tied for second place with a $5,000 award is Shea Nut Ghana Ag Production. And before we wrap up, I'd like to thank my fellow judges, Dean Dan Robeson of the College of Ag and Life Sciences, and Catherine Hartman, also from the College of Ag and Life Sciences. And the winner of the Feed the World Challenge for 2022 is Calf Trend, the sensor technology company. And this is a $15,000 award to get their business moving. Yeah, they're already working. So, Kenny, please thank all the.
Well, that's our show, folks. We went a little bit over, but it was a really fun night. I appreciate the big attendance here, and don't forget, we have some refreshments out there if you'd like to network and snack. Please, we have some young people here that still can eat sweets before dinner. So enjoy. Thank you all.